My parents demanded, "You need to co-sign your brother's business loan after everything we've done for you." So I told them, "Check who's already on the loan papers." Then my dad went pale. I knew something was wrong when my dad called me at 8:12 on a Tuesday morning and asked whether I had signed anything for my brother lately. I was sitting in my car outside my office with a coffee in one hand and my laptop bag on the passenger seat. I had just pulled into the parking lot and was trying to answer a work email before walking inside. The question caught me completely off guard because I had not signed anything for my brother. I told him that, as far as I knew, I had not signed anything. There was a pause on the phone that lasted just long enough for me to notice it. Then he told me that my brother was applying for a business loan and that the bank wanted another person involved. I assumed he meant a normal business loan where my brother needed a second person because his credit history was not long enough. I had heard about the business before, but I had never been involved in it. My younger brother, Ryan, had been talking about opening a small commercial landscaping company for almost 2 years. He had worked for another landscaping company for several years, and eventually decided he could make more money working for himself. I actually supported the idea. I thought he had the experience. I thought he understood the work. I also thought he understood that starting a business meant accepting some financial risk. What I did not want was to become part of that risk. I told my dad that I was not comfortable co-signing any business loan. He immediately reminded me that my parents had helped me years earlier when I bought my first house. That was true. They had given me $18,000 toward the down payment when I was 28. I had never denied that they helped me. I had also paid them back. Not immediately and not in one lump sum, but I had repaid every dollar over the next 3 years. I had bank transfers showing it. My dad knew that. My mother knew that. Apparently none of that mattered anymore. My dad said my brother needed help now and family was supposed to help family. I told him that I understood, but I still was not signing a loan. He got irritated. He said I was making a simple thing complicated. I remember sitting there in my car looking at the clock on the dashboard while he talked. I had 10 minutes before I needed to be inside. I finally told him I had to go. He told me he would call me that evening because my mother wanted to talk to me. I knew immediately that this was not going to be a casual family conversation. That evening, my parents came to my house. They did not usually come over on weekdays. My mother brought a casserole in a glass dish, which somehow made the whole thing feel more serious. My parents sat at my kitchen table while I stood near the counter. My wife was working late that night, so it was just the 3 of us. My mother started by reminding me how much my parents had done for both of us. She talked about school expenses. She talked about helping me with my first car. She talked about the down payment on my house. She talked about all the times they had helped me when I was younger. None of those things were lies. That was what made the conversation difficult. I was not sitting there thinking my parents had never done anything for me. They had. They had sacrificed for me in ways I appreciated, but appreciation and financial obligation were not the same thing. I told them I was grateful. I also told them I was not willing to put my credit, my house, and my finances behind my brother's business. My mother became upset. She said I was treating Ryan like a stranger. I told her I was treating him like an adult. That was apparently the wrong thing to say. My dad leaned back in his chair and started talking about how successful Ryan could be. He had already found commercial clients. He had already priced equipment. He had already talked to a bank. The only problem, according to my dad, was that the bank wanted someone with stronger credit. I asked how much the loan was. My dad said it was around $240,000. That number made me stop. I had expected something closer to $50,000 or maybe $75,000. $240,000 was not something I was going to casually put my name on. I asked what the money was for. My dad said equipment, trucks, insurance, payroll, and operating expenses. I asked whether Ryan had already put any of his own money into the company. My dad said Ryan had invested what he could. I asked how much. My dad became vague. That was the first moment I felt something was off. Not necessarily fraudulent, not necessarily sinister, just off. I asked to see the loan proposal. My dad told me that I did not need to see everything. That made me more uncomfortable. If I was supposedly going to be responsible for $240,000, I absolutely needed to see everything. I told them that. My mother said I was acting like a lawyer. I told her I was acting like someone who did not want to owe $250,000. My dad got angry. He said I was overthinking it. He said Ryan would make the payments. I asked what happened if Ryan could not. My dad said that was why I needed to trust my family. I told him trust was not the issue. The issue was that a co-signer could become responsible if the primary borrower stopped paying. My dad said he knew how loans worked. I told him that was exactly why I wanted the paperwork. The conversation ended badly. My parents left without the casserole. I stood at the kitchen window and watched my dad carry the glass dish back to their car. I felt guilty. That part bothered me more than I expected. I knew my parents thought I was abandoning Ryan. I also knew I was not. I was simply refusing to make a financial commitment I had never agreed to make. The next morning, Ryan texted me. He said our parents had told him I was refusing to help. He said he thought I would understand because I had gotten help when I was younger. I explained that I had already paid our parents back. He said that was not the point. I asked him what the point was. He said the point was that I had a chance to help him build something. I told him I was willing to help him review the business plan. I was willing to look at the numbers. I was even willing to help him find a smaller loan that he could qualify for without me. I just would not co-sign a $240,000 obligation. He did not respond for several hours. When he finally did, he said he understood. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. 3 days later, I received an email from a bank I had never done business with. The email was short. It said there had been an inquiry connected to a commercial credit application and that I should contact the bank if I had questions. I stared at the message for several minutes. I had not applied for a business loan. I had not authorized a credit inquiry. I called the bank. The employee I spoke with would not give me much information over the phone because of privacy rules. She did confirm that my name had appeared in connection with a commercial loan application. She told me that if I had not authorized it, I should document the issue and speak with the bank's fraud or security department. That was the first time I felt genuinely scared. Until then, I had assumed my parents were pressuring me. Now I wondered whether someone had actually submitted my information. I checked my credit report that afternoon. There was a hard inquiry from the same bank. I sat at my desk staring at it. I had never spoken with that bank. I had never filled out an application. I had never given Ryan permission to use my social security number. I called my dad. He sounded annoyed that I was making such a big deal out of it. He said the bank had probably run my credit because I was being considered as a possible co-signer. I asked whether he or Ryan had submitted my information. He said he did not know. I asked how the bank could have my social security number. He said Ryan probably had it from old paperwork. That answer bothered me. I had not thought about it before, but my brother had seen my social security card years earlier when we were helping our parents clean out a filing cabinet. I did not think he would use it. I also did not want to accuse him without knowing. I called Ryan. He sounded genuinely confused. He said he had given the bank information about potential family support, but insisted he had not signed anything in my name. I asked exactly what he had provided. He said he had given them my name, phone number, employment information, and approximate income. I asked why. He said the loan officer had told him they needed information about anyone who might be involved. I asked whether he had given them my social security number. He said he did not remember. That answer stayed with me. I contacted the bank again. This time I asked for instructions on disputing the inquiry. They told me to send documentation stating that I had not authorized the application. I did that. I also froze my credit. It felt extreme. Maybe it was, but I had learned a long time ago that being embarrassed about protecting yourself was usually more expensive than actually protecting yourself. I did not accuse Ryan of fraud. I did not call the police. I did not post anything online. I simply documented everything. I saved the email from the bank. I saved my credit report. I saved every text between me and Ryan. I wrote down the dates and times of my calls. I made a folder on my computer and another paper folder at home. My wife noticed the folder that evening. She asked what was going on. I explained everything. She was quieter than I expected. She asked whether I thought Ryan was trying to put me on the loan without my permission. I told her I did not know. She reminded me that I had been saying for years that Ryan was impulsive with money. I did not want to hear that, not because she was wrong, because I had defended him before. Ryan had borrowed money from our parents multiple times. He had missed credit card payments. He had financed a truck that was later repossessed. He had also paid off some of those debts and worked hard for several years. I kept telling myself that people could grow up. I still believed that. I just did not know whether Ryan had grown up enough to borrow $240,000. A week later, my parents invited us to Sunday dinner. I almost declined. My wife thought we should go because avoiding the conversation would not solve anything. So we went. My mother had made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and rolls. It felt almost normal. That was the strange part. Everyone was passing dishes around while there was a $240,000 loan hanging over the table. Ryan arrived about 20 minutes late. He looked exhausted. He sat beside my dad. For the first half hour, nobody mentioned the loan. Then my dad started talking about the business. He explained that the bank was still reviewing everything. He said the equipment supplier had already given Ryan a deadline. He said Ryan needed the money soon. My mother looked at me and said I was the only person who could make the process easy. I asked what she meant. She said if I signed the paperwork, the bank would approve everything. I asked whether the bank had actually told them that. She said they had been told I was the strongest option. I looked at Ryan. He looked down at his plate. I asked whether anyone else had applied. Ryan said no. I asked whether my name was still on the application. He said he did not know. My dad said it was not a big deal. That was when I realized I was getting nowhere through family conversations. I needed documents. I told my parents that if they wanted me to consider anything, I needed the full loan package. I needed the business tax returns. I needed the bank statements. I needed the business plan. I needed the personal guarantees. I needed to know exactly what I would be responsible for. My father said that was excessive. I told him I was not signing anything without it. My mother accused me of humiliating Ryan. I told her asking for financial documents was not humiliation. She said family should not need paperwork. I remember thinking that sentence sounded nice until you considered what happened when money went wrong. Family members still went to court. Family members still stopped speaking. Family members still argued about who owed what. Paperwork existed because memories changed when money was involved. Dinner ended early. On the drive home, my wife told me she thought my parents knew more than they were telling me. I said I agreed. The next morning, I called the bank again. I explained that I had been contacted by family members about a loan application that appeared to include my information. The bank employee told me they could not disclose the borrower's confidential financial information to me. That made sense. But I asked whether they could tell me whether I had been listed as a guarantor or co-borrower. After verifying my identity, they said my information had been submitted as part of the application. They also told me that the bank had not received a completed signature from me. That was important. It meant I had not yet been legally added as a signer. But it also meant somebody had already taken steps toward putting me on the loan. I asked for written confirmation. The bank said they could provide documentation regarding my dispute. I requested it. A few days later, I received a letter. It confirmed that I had disputed the credit inquiry and that the bank was investigating whether my information had been submitted without authorization. I put the letter in my folder. I also contacted an attorney, not because I wanted to sue my family. I wanted to understand my position. The attorney reviewed the letter and told me not to sign anything. He also told me to communicate in writing whenever possible. He explained that if someone had actually forged my signature, that could become a serious matter. But at that point, there was no evidence of a forged signature. There was only evidence that my personal information had been submitted. He told me to keep records and monitor my credit. That was exactly what I planned to do. For the next 2 weeks, nothing dramatic happened. That almost made me relax. I went to work, I paid my mortgage, I bought groceries, I helped my wife fix a loose cabinet door. I went to the gym on Saturday morning. Life continued. Then one afternoon, I received another email from the bank. The investigation had found that my information had been entered into the application by someone associated with the business. The bank had removed me from consideration as a guarantor. They also told me the application could not proceed with my information unless I independently authorized it. I forwarded the email to my attorney. Then I called Ryan. He was upset. He said the bank had made the situation look worse than it was. I asked him who had entered my information. He said he did not know. I asked whether our father had helped him with the application. He said our dad had helped with some paperwork. That was the first time my suspicion moved away from Ryan alone. I asked Ryan whether he had personally provided my social security number. He said he did not remember doing that. Then he admitted that he had given our father a folder containing his business documents because Dad had offered to help. I thanked him for telling me. I did not accuse him of anything. I simply told him I needed him to send me copies of every document he had submitted. He hesitated. Then he said he would. That night, Ryan emailed me a stack of PDFs. I opened them one at a time. Most of them were ordinary. Business registration paperwork, equipment estimates, insurance quotes, a business plan, bank statements, tax documents. Then I found the personal financial statement. My name was listed as a potential guarantor. My employment information was there. My estimated income was there. My home value was there. My mortgage balance was there. My assets were listed. The information was mostly accurate. That was what made it disturbing. Whoever had filled it out had access to information about me that was not public. I called my father. He did not answer. I sent him a message asking him to call me. He did not respond. The next morning, my mother called. She was angry that I had gone to an attorney. She said I was turning a family issue into a legal issue. I told her I had not done anything against the family. I had simply asked for legal advice after my personal information appeared on a loan application without my authorization. She said Dad had only been trying to help Ryan. I asked whether Dad had submitted my information. She went silent. Then she said she did not know. I asked her to ask him. She said she would. That evening, my dad finally called. He was much calmer than I expected. He said he had not meant to cross a line. He explained that the bank had told him Ryan needed someone with strong credit. He had assumed I would eventually agree. He admitted he had provided the bank with some information from old family financial paperwork. I asked whether he had used my tax return. He said he might have. I asked whether he had used a copy of my driver's license. He said he did not remember. I felt sick. I told him I needed to know exactly what he had submitted. He said he would look. Then he asked me to stop making everything difficult. I told him I was not trying to make anything difficult. I was trying to find out why my financial information had been used. He said Ryan was desperate. That was the first time I realized this was not just about the business. Something had happened behind the scenes. I asked what desperate meant. He said Ryan had already committed to equipment. He had already paid deposits. He had signed contracts. He had employees waiting. I asked how much money Ryan had already spent. My dad would not answer. I called Ryan. He answered immediately. I asked him directly how much debt the business already had. He told me around $92,000. That number shocked me. I had thought the $240,000 loan would be the beginning. Instead, it was being added to existing debt. I asked what the $92,000 was. He explained that some was equipment financing, some was a business credit card, and some was money owed to suppliers. I asked how much cash he had left. He said not much. I asked why our parents had told me the business was doing well. He said they believed it would be. That answer made me angry. I told him belief was not the same thing as cash flow. He agreed. Then he said he had made mistakes. I could hear the embarrassment in his voice. For the first time, I felt sorry for him, not enough to co-sign, but enough to understand that he had gotten in over his head. I asked him whether he had told our parents everything. He said he had. That did not match what my parents had told me. I asked him whether he had ever signed my name. He immediately said no. I believed him. I told him I wanted to help him find a way out that did not involve me taking on his debt. He asked what I could do. I told him I could help him organize the numbers. He agreed. That weekend, Ryan came to my house with a cardboard box full of receipts, invoices, bank statements, and equipment contracts. We sat at my dining room table for almost 5 hours. I made a spreadsheet. We separated fixed expenses from variable expenses. We listed every debt. We listed payment dates. We listed insurance. We listed payroll. We listed fuel. We listed equipment maintenance. We listed taxes. We listed outstanding invoices from customers. The business was not worthless. That surprised me. Ryan actually had several good commercial clients. The problem was that he had expanded too quickly. He had purchased expensive equipment before the revenue had stabilized. He had hired 2 employees before he had enough consistent contracts. He had also taken on short-term debt to cover expenses. The $240,000 loan would have solved his immediate cash problem while making his long-term problem much worse. I told him that. He knew it. That was the first time we had a conversation about the situation without our parents involved. He admitted he was embarrassed. He said Dad had made him feel like he had to keep moving forward because everyone had already invested so much. I asked him whether Dad had personally invested money. Ryan said Dad had loaned him about $35,000. I asked whether there was a written agreement. Ryan said there was a handwritten note. I asked to see it. The note said Ryan owed Dad $35,000. There was no interest rate. There was no payment schedule. There was no collateral. It was basically a family IOU. I asked Ryan whether Dad was demanding repayment. He said no. I asked why. Ryan said Dad kept telling him that once the big loan came through, everything would be fine. That explained a lot. My dad was not just emotionally invested. He was financially invested. If the business failed, Dad stood to lose $35,000. If the business succeeded, Dad got his money back. But if Ryan borrowed another $240,000 and failed, the entire family would be dealing with the consequences. I asked Ryan whether he knew Dad had submitted my information. He said Dad had told him that I was probably going to help. He said he assumed I had agreed. I told him I had never agreed. He looked genuinely ashamed. He said he should have asked me himself. I told him yes, he should have. But I also told him I did not think he had deliberately tried to trap me. That distinction mattered to me. I did not want to destroy my relationship with my brother over something he had not personally done. We spent another hour working through the business. We found several expenses that could be cut. We found one piece of equipment that could be sold. We found a supplier willing to restructure a payment schedule. We also discovered that one of Ryan's commercial clients had an unpaid invoice worth nearly $28,000. That changed the immediate picture. Ryan still had a serious problem, but he was not completely trapped. The next Monday, he met with his bank without our parents. The bank would not give him the $240,000 loan under the existing terms. They offered a smaller line of credit with stricter conditions. It was not enough to solve everything, but it was enough to keep him operating while he worked through the backlog. My parents were furious. My dad called me and said I had sabotaged the business. I told him I had not contacted the bank about Ryan's business. He said I had made Ryan afraid to move forward. I reminded him that Ryan had voluntarily chosen to meet the bank and restructure the application. My dad said that would never have happened if I had simply signed. I asked him what he expected me to sign. He said he expected me to trust the family. I told him trust was not a substitute for due diligence. He hung up. For several days, my parents barely spoke to me. My mother sent one message saying she was disappointed in the person I had become. That hurt. I will admit that. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond immediately. Instead, I put my phone down. My wife told me not to answer while I was angry. She was right. I waited until the next day. Then I sent my mother a simple explanation. I told her I loved her. I told her I was grateful for everything my parents had done for me. I also told her that none of those things gave anyone permission to use my financial information or commit me to a $250,000 debt. She did not respond. About a week later, I received a letter from the bank confirming that the disputed credit inquiry had been removed. That was a relief. I thought the worst was over. Then my attorney called me. He had reviewed another document I had sent him. It was the personal financial statement from Ryan's loan package. He noticed something I had missed. The document had been dated several months earlier than the date Ryan claimed he started the loan application. I asked what that meant. He said it could mean nothing. It could have been a draft. It could have been prepared for a different lender. But he recommended that I find out where it came from. I called Ryan. He checked his files. He found another application. This one was from a different bank. My information appeared there too. Again, I had never authorized it. I felt a wave of anger. I called my dad. This time I did not ask whether he had used my information. I asked him how many lenders he had contacted using my information. He did not answer. I told him I already knew about two. He said he had been trying to help. He said he believed I would eventually understand. I asked him whether he had ever asked me. He said he knew I would say no. That sentence changed something between us, not because it was dramatic, because it was honest. He had known I would refuse. He had simply hoped pressure would eventually make me give in. I told him I could not accept that. He said he was my father. He said he had spent his whole life helping his children. I told him being my father did not give him the right to make financial decisions for me. He became emotional. He said he was afraid Ryan was going to lose everything. I told him I understood. Then I told him that protecting Ryan from every consequence was not the same thing as helping him. My dad said I did not understand what family meant. I told him maybe I understood it differently. To me, family meant helping someone find a way through a problem without putting another family member in a position where one mistake could destroy their finances. The conversation ended without resolution. 2 weeks later, Ryan closed the business. That was hard to watch. He had not failed because he was lazy. He had failed because he expanded too quickly and borrowed too much. He sold the equipment he could sell. He negotiated payment plans with several suppliers. He let the employees go properly and paid what he could. He worked with an accountant to wind everything down. There were still debts. There were still uncomfortable phone calls. There were still letters. But he did not disappear. That mattered. My parents saw the closure as proof that I had ruined his chance. I saw it differently. The business was already in trouble before I ever became involved. The $240,000 loan would have delayed the collapse, not prevented it. That was not something I could prove immediately. It was simply what the numbers showed. Then something happened that I never expected. One afternoon, Ryan called me and said he had found something in the paperwork. He had been going through old files because one of the lenders was asking about documentation. He found a copy of a document with my name on it. It was a personal guarantee. My name was typed in the signature section. There was a digital signature attached. It looked like my name. I had never seen it before. I sent it to my attorney. He told me not to contact the lender directly. He contacted them instead. The lender investigated. They found that the digital signature had been submitted from a computer associated with my father's email account. That did not automatically prove Dad had personally signed it, but it narrowed the issue. The lender also had login records. Those records showed that the application had been accessed from a device used by my father. My dad was furious when he learned the lender was investigating. He said he had never forged anything. He said he had clicked through forms because he thought the bank had already approved my participation. My attorney explained that clicking through a signature process for someone else was still a serious problem. The lender ultimately withdrew the application. They did not pursue the loan. They also confirmed in writing that I had never been approved as a guarantor because my identity could not be verified through the required process. That letter became the document that finally made my parents stop arguing with me about whether I had been unreasonable. My mother read it. She cried. She said she had believed Dad when he told her I had agreed. I asked her whether she had ever actually asked me. She admitted she had not. That hurt more than I expected. For months, I had been treated like the selfish son who refused to help. The truth was that nobody had bothered to ask me what I wanted. They had decided for me. Then they had become angry when reality did not match their plan. My dad eventually apologized. It was not a perfect apology. He spent a lot of time explaining how scared he had been. He talked about Ryan. He talked about the money he had already invested. He talked about how he thought I would come around. But he eventually admitted that he had crossed a line. That was enough for me. I did not immediately forgive him. I also did not cut him off. I needed time. Our relationship became quieter. There were fewer spontaneous phone calls. Family dinners became awkward. My mother tried to keep everyone together. Ryan stopped accepting money from our parents. That was probably one of the healthiest things that came out of the whole mess. He got a job with another landscaping company. He started paying down his remaining personal obligations. He also paid Dad back for the $35,000. It took him nearly 2 years. He did it in monthly payments. There were months when he could only pay a few $100s. There were other months when he paid more. Dad accepted it. I think that was important. Ryan needed to understand that a failed business did not make him a failure, but it also did not mean everyone else had to absorb the consequences. About 6 months after the business closed, Ryan started doing small landscaping jobs on weekends. This time, he used his own money. He rented equipment instead of buying it. He required deposits from customers. He kept the business separate from his personal checking account. He met with an accountant before taking on employees. He refused to borrow money from our parents. Eventually, he built something much smaller. It was not the company he had originally imagined, but it was profitable. That was probably the biggest surprise. He had wanted a fleet of trucks and a large crew. Instead, he ended up with 2 trucks, rented equipment, and a handful of reliable commercial clients. He made less money. He also slept better. My relationship with him improved. We never stopped talking about what happened, but we stopped blaming each other. He admitted that he should have come to me directly. I admitted that I had judged him more harshly than I needed to. I had assumed he was being reckless because he was irresponsible. Later, I understood that some of it was pressure. He wanted our parents to be proud of him. He wanted to prove that he could build something. He also did not want to admit that he was struggling. That does not excuse what happened. It just makes it easier for me to understand. My parents eventually stopped bringing up the loan. That took almost a year. My mother still occasionally mentioned how much they had done for me. Whenever she did, I reminded her that I knew. I never wanted to erase the help they had given me. I just wanted the help to remain a gift instead of becoming a debt that could be collected whenever they needed something. My dad eventually understood that distinction, or at least I think he did. The last major conversation we had about it happened at Thanksgiving. The family was sitting around the table. Ryan had brought dessert. My mother was clearing plates. My dad stayed seated for a while after everyone else got up. He told me he was sorry. He said he had spent a lot of time thinking about the situation. He admitted that he had convinced himself that because I had benefited from his help, he had earned the right to make decisions involving me. He said he was wrong. I told him I appreciated the apology. I also told him I needed him to understand that I would never again sign something just because someone told me it was for the family. He said he understood. That was the end of the conversation. There was no dramatic reconciliation. Nobody cried into anyone's arms. Nobody suddenly became a different person. Things simply became less tense over time. My dad and I started talking more. My mother stopped using guilt when she needed something from me. Ryan and I became closer because we had been through something difficult together. I also changed the way I handle my own finances. I stopped leaving copies of important documents in places other people could access. I changed passwords. I froze my credit whenever I was not actively applying for anything. I checked my credit reports regularly. I created a secure digital folder for important financial documents. I also stopped assuming that family members understood financial boundaries just because they loved me. That was probably the biggest lesson. Love does not automatically make someone careful with your money. Sometimes people make terrible decisions because they are scared. Sometimes they believe they are helping. Sometimes they genuinely think the end justifies the means, but you still have to protect yourself. I used to think that keeping records was something people did when they expected a fight. Now I see it differently. Keeping records prevents arguments from becoming dependent on memory. When everyone remembers things differently, paperwork is not revenge. It is clarity. The strange part is that my parents' original argument had been about everything they had done for me. They believed I owed them a favor. What they never understood was that I did not refuse because I had forgotten what they had done. I refused because I remembered it. They had taught me to work hard. They had taught me to pay my bills. They had taught me not to sign things I did not understand. They had taught me that if I borrowed money, I was responsible for paying it back. I simply applied those lessons when they asked me to do something that could have affected my entire financial future. And when my dad went pale after I told him to check who was already on the loan papers, I was not trying to scare him. I had already seen my name there. I knew what had happened. He just did not realize that I knew yet. That moment was the point when the entire situation changed. Before that, my parents could tell themselves I was being selfish. They could say I was refusing to help my brother. They could say I had forgotten everything they had done for me. Once the documents existed, none of those arguments mattered. The paperwork showed that I had never agreed. The bank records showed my information had been submitted without my authorization. The application history showed my father had been involved. The financial records showed Ryan's business was already carrying significant debt. And the numbers showed that adding another $240,000 would not have solved the underlying problem. It would have transferred the risk to me. That is the part I still think about. I could have signed. Maybe the business would have survived. Maybe Ryan would have succeeded. Maybe everything would have worked out, but maybe it would not have. If it had failed, I would have been responsible for a debt that could have affected my mortgage, my retirement savings, my wife's financial security, and every major decision we planned to make. Nobody could guarantee the outcome. My parents were asking me to gamble my future because they believed my brother deserved a chance. I believed my brother deserved a chance too. I just did not believe his chance needed to be purchased with my financial security. Today, Ryan still runs his smaller landscaping business. He is more cautious now. He keeps records. He uses written agreements. He checks every contract before signing it. He tells me that the biggest thing he learned was that being embarrassed about bad numbers only makes the numbers worse. My parents are still my parents. We still have Thanksgiving together. We still celebrate birthdays. We still argue about small things. Families do not become perfect because one serious problem gets resolved. But there is a boundary now that was not there before. Everyone knows that my financial information belongs to me. Nobody assumes I will sign something because I am the oldest son. Nobody tells me that I owe a favor because someone helped me years ago, and I do not feel guilty anymore when I say no. That took me longer than I expected. For a while, I kept wondering whether I had been too harsh. Then I would remember sitting in that bank's office on the phone, staring at a credit inquiry I had never authorized. I would remember seeing my income and mortgage information printed on a document I had never completed. I would remember my father's admission, that he had not asked me because he already knew I would say no. And I would realize that saying no was not the thing that damaged my family. The decision to move forward without my consent was, I did not win because I outsmarted my parents. I did not win because I found some loophole. I did not win because a judge punished them. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. There was no huge financial settlement. There was no revenge. I simply refused to sign something I did not understand, documented what happened, asked questions, and let the records speak for themselves. In the end, the truth was much less complicated than everyone had made it. My brother's business had been struggling. My father had put money into it. My parents were afraid of losing that money. They thought my credit could solve the problem. They assumed guilt and family pressure would eventually make me agree. Instead, I checked the paperwork, and once the paperwork was checked, there was nothing left to argue about. That was enough.